What's up, Power Project? Welcome to the fourth and final installment of this amazing four-part series with Dr. Shawn Baker and Dr. Paul Saladino, two guys that are kind of running things in the carnivore community. In this series, we've heard a lot of stories and reports of adults having a lot of success on the carnivore diet. Today, we're going to address whether or not this diet is good for children. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Certified Piedmontese, the absolute best beef on the planet. If you're going to go meat-based or full carnivore, the absolute best way to do it is with Certified Piedmontese beef. Higher protein, lower fat, cooks faster, more tender, simply better than anything that's currently available. Head over to Piedmontese.com, that's Piedmontese.com. At checkout, enter promo code POWERPROJECT for 25% off your order, and if your order is $99 or more, you get free 2-day shipping. Head over there, check out our Jacked in Tan Pack and the Power Project Deluxe Bundle that they offer, and we're not honey dicking you. Our promo code works on both of those packages. Thank you to everybody that's been watching the series. Again, this is part 4 of a 4-part series. So if you missed out on episodes 1 through 3, please go back and check those out because there's tons of great information. But for now, enjoy the show.
You know, when we're thinking about this, and you guys have probably got this question before, but adults are doing so well on the carnivore diet, and they also have children. And when you bring in the subject of kids eating just meat, everyone's going to start getting emotional about it. So, how would you suggest a parent approach a situation? Should they have their kids approach and use a carnivore diet in terms of their development?
Yeah, so it's interesting. This is a really important topic and a very important question. I mean, I think certainly we can look at historical populations. You know, these Inuit kids or these Sami kids or Maasai kids. They did fine. I mean, clearly they can do okay. And the deficiencies, when we see kids that are stunted and we see kids with nutrient deficiencies, vitamin deficiencies, these are not kids in these meat-based societies. These are these, starving kids in Africa and Southeast Asia or India where they're small. They have iron deficiency, anemia. It's the most common thing out there. But when we look at children, I mean, one thing we have to realize is they need to be breastfed for a period of time. And breast milk does contain carbohydrate. I mean, it has lactose in there. And so that, because we need a lot of energy to develop that baby brain. So fat is important. Animal fat is full of saturated fat, it's full of, cholesterol. Those things have to occur to make your baby, have the best opportunity. You got to give them animal fat. I believe that strongly. Now, most women, modern Americans and so on, they don't breastfeed for 2.5 years like an indigenous person would. So in that case, you've got to figure a way to get that energy. And you might have to do some carbohydrates with the kids early on. And so that might be fruit or something like that if they tolerate it. As they get older, and the question is, why are people on a carnivore diet? Most people go on the carnivore diet not because they only want to eat meat. I mean, I didn't do that, did I? I was already in a position where my health was compromised, and as are most people that do this, except for some guys that are experimenting younger and trying to get athletic benefit. So I think with kids, you have to be be a little bit more cautious. I think, you can certainly, what do kids in northern Alaska do when there's no fruit around? I mean, they're still surviving, but they're probably breastfed till 2.5 years of age, maybe even 3. So the really young kids, that's a concern. But as they get older, like with my kids, I've got 4 kids. They're, 7, 9, 11, and 13. And they load up on meat. I mean, they load up on meat and eggs and stuff like that. And it's very nice from a parenting standpoint because when I fill them up, they're not asking for snacks every 15 minutes like a normal kid. Dad, where can I? And then the normal response is, here's a granola bar, here's a juice box, here's the fruit leather. I don't got to do that stuff. I get up Saturday morning, I make them eat a feast, and I make them eat it all. And then just because I'm a lazy parent, I don't have to deal with it for the rest of the day because I know they're full. But if they want a piece of fruit afterwards, I'm fine. And I kind of let them do that. And then, even if they want a little piece of a chocolate, piece of chocolate. I try to get dark chocolate. I try to, do the stuff that's not pure junk.
How do you make that convenient? Is there any way to make it convenient? You cook up a lot of food at one time,
quite honestly, once the kids, like my daughters in particular, when I cook up like a ribeye, they go for the ribeye cap, the fat part. They want, Dad, I want this part. And it kind of pisses me off because that's like the part I want.
And you're like,
nah. So, you got to give it to them. But I think kids adapt pretty quickly. I think here's the thing. Parents talk about, really drives me crazy. They got a toddler and he won't eat this or that. a 4-year-old should not be making the nutritional decisions for the house.
They only like mac and cheese.
Right.
You're like, that's all you've fed them.
That's because you give them that, because you give into that. If they're hungry, they will eat. If they miss a meal, they're not going to die. You say, here's learn how to cook. If you give them a dried out piece of burnt meat that you don't know how to cook, the kids are going to hate that. So you got to know how to cook a little bit, you know? So, I mean, get a nice, you know, whatever it is, maybe it's bacon, maybe it's a ribeye, maybe it's some, you know, some liver pate or some Braunschweiger or something like that. Little kids will like that stuff.
Yeah.
And they'll do it and they'll eat that stuff up. I mean, they'll instinctively, I got all kinds of pictures of babies now gnawing on rib bones, just going crazy. So they'll do it as little kids. And then the older kids, I mean, it's just about being a parent and it's saying, look, I don't care if you like the crap. Don't bring it in the house. I mean, my niece, I went over to my sister, and my niece, as much as I love her, was not a very good kid. I mean, she was disrespectful, screaming and yelling. And I talked to my sister. I said, look at your cupboard. Look what you're feeding her. And we literally
she doesn't have an opportunity to act appropriately.
So we took a big giant trash bag and got all the food out. And this girl was 9. She was on the ground screaming and kicking and yelling because we were taking away her basically her addictive food and throwing it in the trash can. It was like watching a 2-year-old have a tantrum. But you know, I went to the store and shopped with her and got her food. It wasn't all carnivore, but it was, you know, meat and a little bit of
let
foods.
them pick out some options they might like. Hey, do you like bacon? Okay, we can eat that.
Right. But I mean, you've got to, like I said, I think you got to preference the animal foods up front. That's the only thing I care if my kids eat. If they don't want vegetables, and they rarely ever want vegetables, I don't make them eat it. You know, one of my daughters really likes fruit, so I'll give her some fruit. But that's how I do it. And I think that, you know, some people may or may not disagree with that.
What evidence do we have based off of people that have done this diet for a long time? You've been doing it for about 2 years. You've been doing it about 5 years. Is that right?
I'm a little over 3, like 3,
a little over,
and a few months. Yeah.
3 years. Is there people have been doing it for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years?
Well, I mean, in Western culture that we know of in America, yeah, there's a few people. There's you know, a few dozen people that have done it. Some up to the 20 years. A lot of 10-year plus people that are doing just fine. I mean, again, I would look at historical populations like, you know, Inuit, Sami. This is one of the things a lot of people like to criticize the Inuit because they didn't live as long as the other Canadians. And what people don't fail to remember is the Inuit have some of the highest smoking rates in the world. They start smoking at age 8. And they smoke, and then they die at 70 on average.
They also probably have a stressful life.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
They have a lot of suicide and violent death and alcoholism now, unfortunately. They've been exposed to the crappy, you know, American diet. But if we look at the Sami population, which is another northern tribe, which is in like northern Finland, or maybe Norway, and you compare them to the other Norwegians, they actually live 4 to 5 years longer. They're living like 81, 82, which is some of the higher populations in the world, and they still live in a horrible environment with poor access to health care, and they're eating reindeer. So, I mean, you know, this is one of those things where we've got information that...
What about like more modern day testimonials, though, if somebody's been doing it for 30, 40 years, something like that?
Well, I mean, there was a guy called the Bear who he was the LSD manufacturer from the 60s. He was like the Grateful Dead sound engineer, and he lived on it for like 53 years until he died in a car wreck at 76 or 7. I mean, that's there. But, you know, and there's people that, you know, that we find out of them and doing it longer. And again, how do you verify this stuff? It's kind of hard to do. You have to take their word at it. I know there's people that have verified, been talking about doing it for at least a decade. So we know that exists. And, you know, the point is, when do these nutritional deficiencies show up? I think if you make it 10 years, it's pretty unlikely. I mean, even 3 years in my case, it's pretty unlikely that it's not like I'm withering away. I mean, you've known me for a couple of years now. It's not like I'm shriveling away and dying. I'm still performing at a high level and, you know, that type of stuff. So anyway.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the thing about kids. I think it's really interesting, the points Shawn made about carbohydrates early on. I think one of the things that we know about kids is they will eat meat and they don't like vegetables. And I don't think we should force that. You know, I think kids know the vegetables are not the thing. And I think a reasonable diet for kids is about fruit and meat. You know, I have no problem giving kids lots of carbohydrates. You don't see many kids getting, you know, childhood obesity or diabetes on fruit and meat. Yeah. Not a problem. I'd love to see kids get organ meats. I'd love to see kids get enough fat. I've got a niece who's 2, and I always encourage my sister, you know, to feed her good meat and try and get her some liver and try and get her some organ meat. She loves eggs. She's smart. She's super smart. She's grown up real well. I will tell a story that I think is really interesting. I have some really good friends, and they had I believe he was 9-year-old son, and they said he was acting weird. And he was kind of having what seemed like OCD symptoms, kind of perseveration, anxiety, just having weird kind of gestures and kind of stereotyped movements. And I said, how's he eating? These folks are really health conscious. And they said, oh, he's totally primal. Okay. And then I said, wait a minute, what does that mean? They said, oh, well, he eats mostly meat and we give him cacao and honey. And I was like, wait, full carnivore. He was better within like 2 or 3 weeks. Like I would say he's probably better within a week. but he was having what appeared to be some kind of like OCD, obsessive symptoms. Full carnivore, better in a week. And so they cut out cacao, they cut out a few other things, and then they were able to reintroduce, but it might have been high-dose cacao, which is a derivative of chocolate. It's from a plant seed, certainly has toxins in it. And so, I mean, he did great. And now those kids are thriving. Specifically, that family does. The kids do carnivore, I think, 4 days a week or 5 days a week, and they get 2 days of carbs a week. And, you know, it works great for them. They're growing healthfully, and they always like their carbs. So you can tell kids are like, can I have a piece of fruit today? You know, they like the fruit. So I don't think we should limit necessarily carbohydrates for kids. Think about the good sources of carbohydrates. But here's a case of a kid who was having some pretty severe psychological symptoms that were really stressing the family out. Better with a complete carnivore diet immediately.
Okay. Now, I know this is going to be pretty specific, but like kids that are teething, like really, really young kids, do you guys have suggestions for what parents can give them?
Yeah, give them a bone to chew on. Give them a rib bone. Yeah, that's big enough so they're not going to choke on it. Let them gnaw on that. They love it.
You can also do, I mean, one of the things that my sister's done specifically is you can just puree up hamburger, right? So you can cook hamburger, puree it, mix it with eggs. Mix it with anything. You can make.
That sounds pretty damn good.
Yeah, you can make like liquid hamburger with eggs and then cook it in a pan. I mean, most of these kids can eat like cooked eggs, things like that. You can get the kids meat. I think evolutionarily, moms would have chewed it. This is like, what was it? It was Gwyneth Paltrow or whoever.
Pre-mastication. Yeah.
You know, I think you could pre-chew the meat for the kid if you want, but you know, when the kids are super young, they can't chew the meat. So you got to give them, I would say, either pre-masticated meat or just grind it up in a blender and mix it with eggs or make it just like a, you know, like a meat kind of pudding or something.
I love it. Meat pudding.
Meat pudding.
What is this diet specifically? Like what do you guys eat? You know, just to give these people that are listening a little list here.
Well, I mean, you know, the way I define the diet and what I do, I mean, I like to define it as an animal-based diet, you know, the nutrition based on animal foods, with either complete elimination or limitation of plant foods as needed, with the end goal being health. And I think health is the end goal here. What I personally eat, I eat a lot of red meat. I mean, probably 95% of my diet's red meat. Sometimes I go strict red meat. I sometimes will include eggs, some seafood, a little bit of dairy from time to time. I find generally I do better without dairy. I don't eat a lot of organ meats, unlike Paul. I know Paul really likes them. I've had them a few times. I honestly just don't find them very palatable. I mean, I think if you get them, I like foie gras. When I was in France, I enjoyed that. I've had some Braunschweiger and liverwurst, which I think is pretty decent as well. But I'm not going to be eating raw liver or anything like that. Paul and I can disagree about the necessity of that. So that's how I do it. But, it works for me. And if I need to change something, I won't hesitate to do that. And I think that's the most important part about the diet, is being willing to change if you need to.
No vegetables, obviously no fruit, right?
No fruit, no vegetables. I mean, I had a piece of birthday cake on my son's birthday and then on my daughter's birthday. Not because it tasted good. Let me be honest about that. One I got sick after, the other one I didn't. So, sometimes, well, not even sometimes, I've had like one or two pieces of fruit. Just my girlfriend had, here, try this piece of orange. Okay, I'll try it. But I don't, I eat such small amounts of anything else. It's not going to make a difference.
Any yogurt or milk or cottage cheese?
I don't like to drink calories for one, just because, my goal is, if I was wanting to put on weight, you guys know the Go Math, the gallon of milk, and JC High's 20 rep squats. And you may not know about that, Paul, but us meatheads probably remember that stuff. You 20 reps a day and you suck down a gallon of milk a day. That
sounds pretty brutal.
There's actually a tribe in Ethiopia that has a contest every year where they try to get the biggest, fattest gut, and the guy who does that wins all the girls or something like that. And they do that by just gorging on milk. And because you can get fat drinking milk, and I think
hell of a contest.
Well, exactly. Look it up. I'm not kidding about this. I think it's in Ethiopia, but I will sometimes have some yogurt. I think fermentable dairy is probably better. I mean, some people will say if you're going to have dairy, it might need to be A2 dairy. I have concerns about raw dairy. I know there's people that swear by it. I mean, I think there is a concern for a risk for infection. Same thing with raw meat, to be honest. You got to be careful of the sourcing of that, because there are people that get sick on it. So if you're going to do it, and I'm not opposed to doing it, you just have to be very, very meticulous about the sourcing of that stuff. So that's me.
So I think about a carnivore diet similarly. What I kind of emphasize in the book is a focus on animal foods for nutrition, and some awareness, if we're going to eat plant foods, of a spectrum of plant toxicity, which plant foods are more toxic and which plant foods are less toxic. I eat a full carnivore diet, so I completely exclude plant foods, but I realize that some people may want to include them for entertainment, color, variety, things like this. And I think that if we are eating a carnivore diet, or if we're eating a diet that emphasizes animal foods for nutrients and thinks about a spectrum of plant toxicity, I would call that carnivore-ish. And I think that's pretty good. If we don't have autoimmune disease or other issues that are unresolved, we might be able to include some of those, but thinking about which are more and less toxic. Personally, I like to eat nose to tail carnivore. I kind of imagine, or, from what I've learned about anthropology, this is the way their ancestors would have eaten animals, kind of nose to tail.
Or in your case, penis to mouth, maybe.
Yeah. I think ass to mouth.
Wait, that sounds a little weird.
The last podcast we did, Andrew afterward came up and said, "Can we call it ass to mouth?"
Sounds like there's a movie about that there somewhere.
Nose to tail. So, we get the deer, and it's the same thing. We're going to eat the muscle meat. I'm going to eat the backstrap. I'm going to eat the kidney fat. I'm going to eat the kidneys. I'm going to eat the liver. I'm going to eat the heart. I'm going to eat the spleen. I'm going to eat the testicle maybe occasionally. And I'm going to eat the bone marrow. And I also have been really interested recently in eating bones for calcium, specifically bones that I'm making out of bone broth. They become quite brittle, especially the trabecular bone at the ends is quite brittle. If you ever eat chicken wings or something, or you roast a duck wing, you can eat the end of the bone. And I think that's something our ancestors would have done, was eat the parts of the bone that they could eat. I've been really interested in sort of, systemic pH. And though people have concerns that high protein diets will raise systemic pH, it doesn't seem to change in the serum. But what we can see is changes in the urine pH. And what it appears is that is not necessarily driven by animal foods per se, or a need for plant foods to balance that sort of urinary pH, but just a balance of minerals, specifically alkalizing minerals, which include calcium, magnesium, and potassium. And from that perspective, I've thought, well, it kind of makes sense evolutionarily to get a calcium source on my carnivore diet, keep track of the urinary pH. And I've done that with sort of bone broth and things like that. So the majority of my diet is a mix of meat and fat. I try and source all my meat from the regenerative farms. I use a lot of salt, and then I'll eat organs at every meal. Like I said, I try to do the organs raw. It's just the most palatable way for me, and it's what I've got. I'll usually do some liver, some kidney, some heart, some spleen, things like that, brain if I've got it. That's generally what I do. I'll mix in some other meats occasionally. I had duck the other day. It was pretty good. I'll do seafood, but rarely. Got to be careful of metal contamination. And geez, if you look at, we polluted the ocean so much. So that's generally what I'm doing, is mostly animal foods, mostly regenerative ruminants, nose to tail.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. And people that do this long term, whether they decide to go nose to tail or not, they do tend to gravitate to ruminant animals. And I think that's consistent with, you think about it, if they threw us back 50,000 years ago and gave us spears, and there were slow moving big animals and birds, which ones are you going to hunt? Which ones will make the most sense? Which is going to give you the most calorie? You remember the old Rocky scene where he's chasing the chicken around? Those things are going to be tough to kill with a spear. But a big slow moving elephant, I don't know if you remember Africa, but I was in the Serengeti in the Ngorongoro crater, and we had this big group of elephants walking by, and we stopped, and they, like 40 of them in unison, just turned and looked at us and say, "What you looking at?" Like, what are you going to do? Because they're not really scared of humans because we're so puny. Mm-hmm. What they don't know is we have spears, and we run up and stab them in the side, and it's game over. And we know that humans could easily kill elephants. And so I think we gravitated to these big grazing herbivores. And, fish, which we certainly clearly ate at some point, was secondary. And I've not seen anybody successfully do this diet on like a pure fish diet or a pure chicken diet. I just haven't seen it happen yet. Maybe you've seen somebody. I've never seen anybody do that yet.
I've never seen anybody do it. I would have concerns, and I've dissuaded people from doing a predominantly seafood-based carnivore diet just because of the bioaccumulation of metals. Unfortunately, shellfish is just pretty high in cadmium these days. And most fish is going to have some organic mercury in it, with smaller fish like salmon and maybe sardines being lower. But everything bigger is going to have quite a bit of mercury. And I've seen it in my clients that if they eat even wild Alaskan salmon multiple times a week, I'll see their serum mercury bump a little bit. I'm thinking, I don't know if that's a good thing, So it's like, and I think we get plenty of omega-3 from animal fat or egg yolks, things like that. I don't think I'm not a fan of hyperdosing omega-3. I don't buy into that.
Yeah, we might not need it from a dietary standpoint, but your body's going to get some of it from the meat and stuff like that, and eggs. And
you need. There's omega-6 is actually probably not that essential. There's kind of an idiosyncrasy there around linoleic acid and arachidonic acid. We probably need some EPA or DHA in our diet, but I don't think we need as much as people are pushing. I'm not a fan of 5 gram, 20 gram, 10 grams omega-3 per day. I don't think we should be supplementing with tons of fish oil that's highly oxidized and processed and, distilled and things like this. I don't think we need any of that. I think we just, there is EPA and DPA and DHA and animal fat. And I think that'll be enough for humans, especially if we're eating egg yolks or other richer sources. I don't think we need to go crazy with the seafood for that.
Yeah. And I think one of the issues around the belief that we have to have all this omega-3 in the diet is, again, it's an epidemiologically based belief that we see people like Japanese that eat a lot of seafood and they live a long time, and they just make that connection. Well, that's why they live a long time. Well, it could very well be they live a long time because they're not obese and they don't overeat. And there's a lot of other factors why they don't have cardiovascular disease. And we've just kind of taken didn't think about it all the way through. And so now everybody thinks we've got to eat all this fish and seafood, and there may not be anything there. So I think that's an important thing to talk about.
They kind of made that same mistake with the Inuits. Like this is the paradox. Like, how can they not get heart disease and all this whale blubber? And now we realize, hey, that probably seal fat doesn't give people heart disease. Like whale blubber probably doesn't give people any heart disease. So there's no paradox there in the first place. This is kind of a silly thing.
You guys both have books out. What's your book?
Well, my book is The Carnivore Diet, and so it came out in November, and it's been on Amazon doing well. And I mentioned Paul at the back of the book, and I know Paul's got. I'll let Paul talk about.
You throwing any cheap shots at all? Or you just are you
shot.
or are you?
Well, no, I didn't. No, Paul. I think Paul's done a great job. I had a chapter saying something about, I can't remember what it's called. It's called veganism. Why it's not all it's cracked out to be. So there's a little bit of cheap shouting in there and we had, as you guys probably remember, Joel Furman on the show saying I should be thrown in jail.
Has anybody coming to arrest you yet?
I have not been arrested yet.
That's
but
amazing. You should I agree with Joel Furman.
I want Joel Furman to there's my book. I want Joel Furman to make a citizen's arrest and pull me in himself and see what happens.
Oh my God.
How about you, Paul?
So I just got the proof of my book. It's coming out next month, mid-month. It's called The Carnivore Code.
Pain in the ass, right? Putting together a book.
It's such a pain in the ass, man.
But it feels good to have that copy in your hand.
It does feel good to have the copy in my hand. You guys can see that.
Is that a lion?
It's a tiger. Yeah, with the eyes. It'll be available on Amazon mid-February, probably on or about February the 11th. And I tried to I don't know, I just realized that the carnivore diet's really controversial. And I just wanted to put as much in there as I could. So it's got a lot of references, pretty technical.
That's because this guy's triggering people all the time.
I don't know. Everybody's getting triggered. So I think that between the two books, we're going to have a lot for people to attack, and we'll welcome, the rebuttals and the debates. And I think we've got a lot of resources coming out for people. And I think that, there's going to be so much good literature in this space now. Between Shawn's book and my book, I hope that people will have to kind of answer to it and say, what's wrong with my book? Show me why you think my book isn't good. Show me, what's wrong with this, and we'll have conversations.
I'll get you in a rear naked choke.
Yeah, exactly. So,
what's going on with meatrx.com? What do we got going on with that?
Yeah, and so this is another thing that I'm just trying to do. Like I said, I'm trying to make this. This solution to, I think the overall picture is we have now, the healthcare industry is clearly sick. We have what I consider the disease management industry. We have people that go in, they get a Band-Aid put on, and then they come in the next time the Band-Aid needs to be changed out. And that is a model, and it's not the physician's fault. This is a system. The system has become a business model. It's in the administrative, the number of administrators in healthcare has gone up 700-800%. Doctors have flatlined, and so it's all about this business turning over as many patients as possible. It's not doing a good service to most of our patients. There's things that the healthcare industry does well. If I break my femur in a car wreck, don't put ribeyes on it, right? Bring me to the hospital so I can get taken care of. But I think there has to be an alternative, and I think what I'm trying to do is, in a very affordable way, make this an option lifestyle through coaching, through support. One of the things we do know about any endeavor, it's a lot easier when you have a support system. And there's not a lot of people supporting you in a carnivore diet right now. You're kind of the weirdo, you're the freak. Oh my God, you're going to die. You're killing the planet. And so we're developing a support system where we've got coaches that are trained. They know it. They're all on the same page. We've got them on the same platform so we can monitor what they're doing. Hopefully we can collect data. And so we can say, this is our success rate with psoriasis. diabetes. And then we can put it up against the standard of care down the road and say, look, UPS, look Dell Computers. Our success rate is this, and the healthcare system is this. And if we get what I think we're going to get, I think we have a potential to make a huge impact. And there's going to be other things that are going to come out similar to this, because we know that where it's at is lifestyle, I think, for many people. And I think the market's going to dictate that. We are very competitively priced. I mean, a coaching session is $18 for half an hour, which is ridiculously cheap. I mean, it's, what is that? A couple cups of coffee. It's not even a decent grass-fed steak. So we're trying to make it, as accessible to as many people as possible. Like I said, I don't care about, the bodybuilder who's already 99% of the way there, the rich dude that's going to live to 90 anyway because he's rich. I want to take care of as many of these people that are kind of struggling as possible, and make it as accessible, as affordable as possible. And that's what that MeterX is about. We've got a very, very nice, capable CTO, Chief Technical Officer out of Silicon Valley. He's just tremendous AI data engineer. It's making a lot of this happen behind the scenes. And I'm just out there every day just beating the drum, in any way.
You're doing a good job of it. Your YouTube is really taking off.
Well, I mean, that's coming along, and I'm doing anything I can. And a lot of people criticize me because, I sometimes make fun of vegans. Like, I do it quite a bit, quite honestly. But, I mean, it's just, I think we have to fight on every single plane that we can. I mean, it's, it's a propaganda war. It's a gunfight. If you bring a knife to a gunfight, I mean, I appreciate the science, but quite honestly, it's boring to most people. I mean, you put up a study, and I put up a study on my thing that I think is interesting, and I get 6 people looking at it. I put up a silly comic video about veganism, and I get 10,000 people looking at it. So you got to play the game like it's played. And right now, it's social media, as you well know, and you've got to. Sometimes it gets tiring, as you know. I mean, but you got to. That's how the war. That's how this battle is going to be fought. Whether it's won or not is going to depend on who does it. Like I said, I'd rather go down standing up than on my knees. Whether we win or lose. And so that's the way I've taken. That's been my approach. And
Paul, you got a podcast going as well. What other ways are you trying to get the message out there other than just the book?
So I got a podcast called Fundamental Health. People can go to my website, which is carnivoremd.com. We got a blog there. And I think those are the main avenues for now. I mean, I got a YouTube channel. We're trying to repurpose. So one of the things that's been super fun on the podcast is to have a lot of really great people on. I get kind of geeky on the podcast and go down some rabbit holes. And, I think that people are consuming content via video. So we're trying to repurpose a lot of the snippets from those podcasts and make them more accessible for people that can't or don't have time to get through 2 hours. I mean, sometimes they get really loquacious and we get quite technical and it'll go over 2 hours. So we're trying to pull up some of those high points now. So on my YouTube channel and on Instagram, people are going to start seeing a lot of more highlights coming out of just like the many podcasts that I've been doing. I've been fortunate to have some really cool people on and some debates, and I got some fun stuff coming up.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Where can people find you? What's your handles on Instagram and wherever else you want to plug?
Yeah, so Instagram, it's Shawn, SHAWN, Baker, BAKER 1967 for the year I was born. Twitter, I've still got, I think we got like 50-some thousand on Twitter. So it's SBakerMD, and I think it's S and the B are capitalized and the MD's capitalized. YouTube channel, I try to put up a YouTube video every day. I just do like 5-10 minutes a day, just kind of put a little content. That seems to work for me. And
I love it. I love that you're sharing testimonials from people and all the different content.
I've kind of come up with this little, a little of this, a little of that.
That's a little bit like a show.
Yeah, it's like a little news thing. Yeah. It's like a little 5-minute news show. Like this is a testimony, because it is funny. Some people hate it, some people love it, some people like, so I just try to do it all, and that's been going on. And then Facebook, the World Carnivore Tribe, is we've got about 3,000 members now. And then of course MeetRx is where I do the one thing I really like about MeetRx, because we've got this video platform. It's all through Zoom, and we have every day at 9 a.m. I have a meeting, and I have 40-50 people show up, and we're all on video, and I just answer questions, and we have nice dialogue. And there's a doctor in there, Lisa Wiedemann, who's been doing carnivore for 11 years, and she shows up all the time. And so we have all this perspective and this back and forth. And now we've got all these support groups. We've got a women's group, a gut health group, a heart health group, a seniors 65 plus group, an autoimmune group, mental health groups, all these support groups, which I think is, again, I think support is really crucial. And I think that makes a big difference.
Paul?
What was the question again?
Just plug in where people can find you.
Oh, yeah. So Carnivore MD is all the social handles. And then I got a YouTube channel, which is Paul Saladino MD. Like I said, we're going to be putting the highlights up there, and you can find all my podcasts there. CarnivoreMD.com is the website. Carnivore MD is the handle everywhere.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming out. Andrew, where can people find you?
I have Andrew's.
Oh, we stole his microphone.
There we go. Well, now that I got a microphone, I can say something. What's your stance on like charred meat now? Because I remember last time around, you were like, you guys got to do the sous vide. Don't overcook it.
I'm not as worried about it anymore. I think you got to be a little bit careful about that. But here's the interesting thing. So I had a guy on my podcast, James Clement. He wrote a book called The Switch. And he brought up something really interesting. And he's plant-based, so we disagreed about a lot of stuff. But his book was about mTOR and longevity. And we sort of had a friendly debate. And he even agreed that eating a carnivore diet wouldn't shorten your lifespan. I was like, yeah, no shit. But he, the longest lived person that he met was 122, and she'd smoked cigarettes for 90 years, right? And so he was even suggesting that perhaps the hypoxia from cigarettes might be a little bit of a hormetic. What we know is that polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, heterocyclic amines from the cooking of meat activate NRF2 in the liver. They are these sort of xenohormetics, right? Now, I've talked about these with plant compounds in the past. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole right now. But, cigarette smoke does the same thing. And I've got this kind of, after talking to him, this is a pretty controversial opinion, so I'll just lay it out here and people can fillet me if they want. Native Americans smoke a lot of tobacco, but it's natural tobacco, right? Isn't it possible that all these compounds are just a little bit of hormesis, right? And again, the problem I have with plant hormetics and many of these compounds is they're going to circulate in the body and do damage elsewhere other than the NRF2 system. But if we're just talking about NRF2 and we're talking about antioxidant response, I think that a little bit of smoke, whether it's from a wood fire, a cigarette that doesn't have 450 chemicals in it, right? A little bit of tobacco that's been used ancestrally for thousands of years, or polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, heterocyclic amines, is probably okay for us. We've developed P450 systems in the liver to deal with this. I think we can overwhelm it. You don't want to over brown your meat or overcook your meat, but a little bit from time to time is probably just going to poke that system a little bit and probably isn't that big a deal. Mm-hmm. That's my opinion on it.
Yeah, I would say that, first of all, red meat does not cause cancer. I mean, I don't think there's any evidence that really supports that. I think
definitely not.
The argument that Gordon got and the Nutrix guys, I think, is solid. So if you accept that red meat doesn't cause cancer, then any mechanism, whether it's, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons or heterocyclic amines or TMAO or saturated fat or heme iron, all of that is out the window. I mean, because you've got mechanism. We can show the same mechanisms that broccoli would cause cancer, or celery, or cabbage. I mean, there's mechanisms there. So if you accept that red meat doesn't cause cancer, then I don't care how you do it. Now, if you're going to burn it so much it doesn't taste good, that's probably not a good idea. Yeah. So I sear my meat. I enjoy it. It tastes better. Humans have been cooking meat minimum since we've been Homo sapiens, 400,000 years, and possibly as far back as 1.8 or 2 million years. There's an interesting hypothesis that Homo erectus couldn't have left Africa during the Ice Age into Europe without control of fire because they would have been too damn cold. Mm-hmm. So we may have been cooking meat for a long, long time. Surely we have adaptations to that. And we only cooked meat one way back then. It was over a fire. And when you cook meat over a fire, you're going to get some char on there, Yeah. And so I don't really worry too much about it, quite honestly.
Yeah, as with most people, they're going to hear something they don't like, so then they'll just go to the next person that does say the thing that they like. And we had Dr. Ken Berry on our podcast, and he said the same thing. We've been cooking over fire since forever, so a little bit of charred meat's not going to kill you. He said the same thing. It will not do anything to you. So I'm like, I wonder what Paul's doing these days. But yeah.
Yeah. I think that it's, something to be aware of, but I wouldn't overchar it. I wouldn't burn it to a crisp, but I think that a little bit every once in a while we've got systems to deal with that.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to shut up. At I am Andrew Z on Instagram. Make sure you're following at Mark Bell's Power Project on Instagram, at MB Power Project on TikTok, Twitter, Byte, Facebook.com/Mark Bell's Power Project, LinkedIn.com/IN/Power Project. Yeah, we're Twitch, Mixer. Where else we got? We got at MB Power Project on Periscope too. Nsima.
Yeah.
Where you at?
At Nsima Inyang on Instagram, YouTube, and Byte, BYTE, and Nsima Inyang on TikTok and Twitter.
There you go.
At Mark Smelly Bell. Strength is never a weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch y'all later.
Nice.